So welcome students. In this video we'll be learning how to write an exponential equation given a graph or a table. And either way works. Basically, if I have a graph, I'll pick points off the graph to create a table. And if you have a table, you already know what the graph looks like, so you just use the points from the table. So either way works. They're interchangeable, and I hope you see that as we do this. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at is what we call the general form for an exponential equation. And it looks like this. So y equals a, which will be the y-intercept. B is a growth factor, and it's raised to the x exponent. And there's another value that's called the k value. Now the k value, you can see here from my graph as I draw this line, is what we call the line of asymptote. And so what you want to do is look at that where that graph flattens out, and wherever that is at, that's the k value. And in this case, that k value is a 1. And so now what I want to do is I'm going to grab 3 points from this table. And the first point, I think it's the most important one to remember. It's called the y-intercept. And even though it's not going to be the value for a, the y-intercept is the point on the graph where your line, your equation, the line of your equation crosses the y-axis, and that is at 0 and 3. So if we zoom out of there, you're going to be able to see there is 0 and 3 right there. Okay, so now that will be used to find the y-intercept. Now remember, that's not exactly the y-intercept of our equation. It's not a, but it will help us to find it. All right, the next point, I'm going to go back to the left, and I see that I have a -1 and 7. And I'm going to use that point to find the growth factor b. And then I'm going to find one more point, and if I look there, that line crosses as a -2 and 19. So that last point, I will eventually use that -2 and 19 to check my equation to see if I've got the right equation. Okay, very good. Let's move on. Now I'm going to use the 0 and 3 and k equals 1 to rewrite, use this table to find the general form. And I'll use those values 0 and 3 and 1 to rewrite this general form. So we can see that the y value is 3 from our table. A I don't know. B I don't know, but I do know that x is 0 and k I know is 1, the line of asymptote. Now it's important to remember that anything raised to the 0 power is 1. It's not 0, it's 1. So I'm going to rewrite this using that fact. So it's a times 1, which would be a, plus 1, which is a k factor. Now we're going to go ahead and solve for a. So I add, subtract 1 from each side, or add a -1, and I get 2 equals a, or a equals 2. Now I'm going to rewrite that general form again using the new value I have for a. So y equals 2 times b raised to the x power plus the line of asymptote value, which is k, and we found that to be 1. Now all we have to do next is find b. And you can see the point that I have for b. I have 7 and a -1. So y, which is 7, so y equals a. A we found was 2 just a second ago. The b I don't know, but I know it has a -1 on it for the x when y is 7. I have plus 1. Now you see I'm getting rid of the 1 on the right side. I subtract 1 on the left, and I get 6 equals 2 times b raised to the -1. Now that -1, I can't write b with a negative exponent, so eventually that's going to have to change. Divide each side by 2. So I have 3 over 1 equals b to the -1. So I can't write it as a negative exponent, so b is going to come in the denominator. That makes 3 go to the denominator, right? And 1 goes on top. So 3 over 1 becomes 1/3. And then my b now is positive. It comes to the first power. So there we go. B has to be 1 over 3. So there we go. Now let's write our final answer for the equation is y equals 2 times the quantity, and I'm going to write that 1/3 in parentheses, so when that exponent operates on it, it takes 1/3 as one number. I keep the order of operations correctly, then I have the +1. Now I want to try -2 and 19 in this to make sure I've got the right equation. If I have the right equation, I should put 2 in for x and get 19 out. So I'm going to use my calculator to do this. And I have a TI calculator, so I'm going to type it in as 2 divided by 1 divided by 3. That exponent, I'm going to put it in parentheses just to make sure that it's calculated correctly, and then I will add 1. And I'll type that in my calculator. Same way I have it on my paper. Put the -2 in parentheses to make sure that calculates that -1 correctly, and add 1. And I get 19, so you can see that it does check out. You can see where I put a -2 in for the x, and the y that I got out was 19, which matches the value on my table. So that's how you do this, and I appreciate you watching this, and if you have any questions, come see me.